Every mic has a different way of turning on. Hello. Um, Welcome. My name is Katie Porter. I am Executive Director of Inlandia Institute. Today we have a very special presentation for you, featuring this guy over here. I don't know who he is. He just wandered in with a trombone. I think his name is Dan. A street artist. We all know who Dan Bernstein is. Even if you've never met him in person, he's been a columnist for many, many years and now retired, but continuing to regale us with many different kinds of stories, including through his trombone. I think that's the first time I've ever heard Queen on the trombone. And with us today, we have a former colleague of his, Chris Lovkin, formerly with the Press Enterprise also, where Dan worked for many, many years. Also a director of communications for UCR, and also a musician, a singer with many different local choirs, including the Riverside Resistance Chorus and the Raincross Master Chorale. So before we officially begin, I do want to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, the Inlandia region is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us to live and work on their ancestral homelands. So I'm now going to turn it over to our good friends up here, Dan and Chris, and one final word. I have one of these in my pocket. I imagine many of you do too. Please put it on silent, and if you could please silence your cell phones just so we don't have any interruptions. And without further ado, welcome Dan and Chris.
All right, so we do have working microphones. And I just wanted to say thank you for playing some Queen. That is one of my favorites.
Thank you. It's one of those rare finds, I think. I think sometimes I would play in a lot of times I play in assisted living places, and my repertoire has been greatly expanded because some of the people there say, do you have Stevie Wonder? Do you have Queen? Do you have Herb Alpert? And the answer, no, no, and no, and then I would finally find the book and the music, and I thought this is just the rest of the book that contains Queen is not that great, but this is a really great arrangement, and I love playing it. It's kind of intimidating, but I love playing it. It's a great tone.
Well, thank you for writing the book. I have already read it. I bought a couple copies because I needed one for a gift from my mom, who's a big fan. We're all big fans of yours. I've been telling people I get to interview Riverside celebrity columnist Dan Bernstein. Very exciting. And we get to reminisce a lot about the olden days of the Press Enterprise and how much fun that was. And some other Press Enterprise folks have come to see us. So hey to all the fans of Tim Hayes. And one thing I noticed about the book is that you begin and end with your mother. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of how hard parents work to create this place where their young people will thrive. And so I just wondered, what did your mom do that other parents can learn from? What did she do to keep you playing your music?
A lot of threats. She was really, I guess, kind of a cheerleader. We didn't know it at the time. A lot of times she was just pushing us to do things. Like I wrote in the book, during the summer, she would drive us to a little round church down the hill where we learned to type. And we'd had to have typing lessons, and this was before, I think we were probably in junior high school. So there was always, my mom was a highly motivated person, so there was always something that she wanted us to do. My sister recalls that her motivation was to have us all play an instrument so we could get into college. And that I never heard that, but I just know that even from the very beginning, playing tonette was something that she wanted us to start in on. And then we kind of graduated from there. It just almost seemed natural in our household. That's kind of, it was a subtle force. It wasn't anything terribly overt. And then sometimes it actually boiled over. And I think I recount in that first chapter where I kind of got into it with my mom. I was, I think, 7th grade, and I thought I was being unjustly treated, kind of child labor, of having to have piano lessons and trombone lessons at the same time. And we were driving down the freeway having this argument, and I won't tell you what I said because you can read the book, but I told her something that I still regret to this day. And but I shouldn't have said it. I was very sorry. And my father made me feel even smaller than I was at that time. But it was just that kind of care, I guess you would say. My mother really cared about, there were 4 of us, and each of us played an instrument. My older sister played viola, and she was quite good. She actually had to make a choice whether to become a professional musician or not, or liberal arts major, psychology, I think she. And my younger sister played violin and hated it, and then played bassoon. My young brother played oboe. And there was a time when my mother took up cello. So all of us played an instrument except my dad, who just retreated to a corner, a neutral corner. And I remember my sister's viola teacher. He was an Air Force Academy sergeant, kind of drill instructor, but he played bassoon. And he gave my little sister, bassoon lessons, but he also composed I won't call it a concerto, a piece for trombone, oboe, bassoon, viola, and cello. We played it once. That was it.
What about your siblings? Did they continue with their music also, or did they put it away?
They put it away. They did. I think my brother is taking up some guitar now. He's actually played guitar when he was a kid, but kind of let it go. But for the most part, I'm sort of the lone survivor playing. And I think my sister would want to go back to it now that she's older and her kids are pretty much out of the house. But yeah, as far as sticking with it, I was the only one.
So by happenstance, last Thursday, I'm walking through the Kaiser corridor, and I spot you, which is really one of the first times that I've seen you playing. My husband has seen you a couple more times and has told me that you've been there, but just by happenstance on Thursday, I saw you. So you're in a hallway, people are kind of talking about their own, things, their own medical situations, or people, kind of ignoring you in some cases, but other people kind of sitting and listening. So how do you keep yourself motivated to come back and sit in the hallway again when, sometimes they're not there to listen?
I really love doing that. It's I was telling you before we come in, I started volunteering in Kaiser's music therapy program before I retired, maybe a year or two before I retired, actually. And it was something that I'd never even thought of. I wanted to volunteer at something, and the head of the volunteer services at the time said, well, how about music therapy? Don't you play an instrument? And duh, it was right in front of me, but I hadn't thought of it. And it's really enjoyable. I'll tell you a couple of things. First of all, it seems to kind of change the mood in a hospital. And I really found that out when I've been playing for maybe a couple of weeks or months, and a young woman on the staff of ICU said, "Why don't you come up to ICU and play, the intensive care unit?" And I thought she was being polite. And I basically said, "Well, thanks, I'll think about it." And I didn't think about it because I thought, a trombone in an ICU? It just didn't seem to fit. And so a couple of weeks went by, and she came again and said, "No, I'm serious, come up to ICU." And so I did, and what I saw was just pretty amazing. It wasn't so much for the patients, it was for the staff, which I hadn't even considered. These folks are just on red alert all the time. It's very tense in there. And that's kind of what they explained to me. We just need to lighten the mood a little bit. And so I would play, and a lot of people would just be going about their business, but some people would start dancing. Other people would come up and tell me what their kids play, what kind of instrument their kids played, show me videos of the drummer or the guitar player. And it just seemed to change everything. It was a climate changer, almost like pet therapy, where a dog walks into a waiting room, and it's not a joke, it really happens. A dog walks into a waiting room and things just change. So I really, I thought that it really made a difference. And the thing that really struck me is how many people did come up to me between tunes and start telling me their stories, what they played. Like one gentleman last week, he was standing back against the wall and he wanted to take a photo or video, and he said, "Is it okay if I do that?" And I said, "Sure." So he takes a video, I finish my song, and he comes up and he explains to me that his father, who has since died, this is an older gentleman, used to play trombone. And so he was taking a video so he could send it to his sister and ask her if that reminded her of anything. Other people have come up, and this is actually where I got the idea for the book, and say, "I used to play trumpet, or I used to play clarinet or something, but I gave it up, and I really feel bad about it. There's a lot of regret there." And so I kind of was approaching this book from two angles, really. One for people, adults, who really had that music at one time, but had given them up. One to maybe inspire them to pick it up, take their horn out of the attic, or wherever it is. And also for kids in school now, to realize that even if they don't go on to play big time, Fox Theater, Live Nation, they can take their music with them, and it's very portable, and they can have that part of their life be extremely enriched. So I think I guess the common answer is the interaction with people. That kind of told me that there was something important about music, and that a lot of people had their stories, and maybe this would be kind of a catalyst to them kind of getting back into things.
I sing with a threshold choir, and we're sometimes at the bedside for people who are passing from this life into the next life, and we're singing these very gentle songs. And there is evidence that there's a relaxation of the body as the heart rate is slowed down. They feel calmer, they're not so agitated. And so the families who are watching the process also have a calmer feeling and are comforted by the singing at the bedside. And so I think it's true that during the pandemic, a lot of this had to stop. So your playing Kaiser had to stop, and the threshold group couldn't be by the bedside anymore, and so we had to think of other ways to deliver music. So some people went home and played solitaire during the pandemic, and some people made sourdough bread. But you wrote a book, and I just want you to tell us more about the impetus for the book project.
Yeah. Well, that definitely was a pandemic project. I started it, I'm guessing maybe summer of 2020, it kind of occurred to me to that there was something. I think the book starts out with a gentleman from an assisted living facility in Sisters, Oregon, where I spend the summer. And he came up to me after I'd got through playing. I was packing up, and he said, "How long have you been doing this?" And I told him grade school. I started playing trombone in grade school, and he said that he played trumpet and flugelhorn in Virginia. That's what he grew up playing, trumpet and flugelhorn. But then after he graduated, he wanted to become a forester, and he said, chase girls. So he put his flugelhorn and trumpet away, and then he said, "I've been kicking myself ever since." And this guy was 90 years old. So that, again, was another impetus to write it. And then I try to think, if I wrote something like this, what would I leave in and what would I leave out, too? I wanted it to be kind of a musical sort of thing, musical memoir. I included a chapter about my day job because the title says he kept his day job, so I thought people might want to know, well, what did he do during the day? How did he waste all that time? And it just sort of, I'll tell you another thing too. I didn't know much about my family. My parents, people, they lived in Russia, they lived in Ukraine, and they came over. I had vague ideas, but I had a cousin who was one of these, what he called an ancestry rabbit hole dweller, and he had a lot of stuff. And so it was kind of education, some research as well. So it was more of kind of what's the arc of the book going to be? What music-related steps were there along the way that I thought were significant, that had an impact on my life? And that's kind of how it took form.
You write that you thought you were going to play clarinet, and then someone handed you a trombone, and that became the instrument. Tell us about an influential teacher, and you could read a little bit to us if you'd like from the book.
He had to be a trombone because the word got out, probably from my mother, that I sucked my thumb. I was still sucking my thumb, and I had this almost barbed wire appliance in the roof of my mouth, so that if my thumb went in, it would get impaled. And he wasn't about to let somebody mess up his clarinet mouthpiece, so he gave me a trombone mouthpiece instead. Kind of. So this. Oh yeah, that's probably. You know what? I can even move that. Is that better? Yeah. I wanted you to see my hair, because I did wash my hair. So this is a passage about a trombone teacher that I had, who had quite an impact on my life, actually. Let's see here. Okay. Pardon me if you know what? Let me do one thing, okay? I have 3 pairs of glasses up here. And these are my reading glasses. Excuse me a moment. Oh, okay. That's sure. Can you hear me now? Yeah? Okay. In the 10th or 11th grade, I started taking lessons from Tasso Harris, a well-known, though not to me, tough-love professional who someone must have mentioned to my mother. I had graduated from an easy on the parental wallet student trombone to a beautiful, I'm not worthy, King 3B Silver Sonic, which is right here, I still have it, that remains the only piece of silver that my wife and I own. I remember begging my parents for a baseball mitt autographed by Mickey Mantle, but pining for a King 3B, no recollection whatsoever. The Silver Sonics snuggled into a cushy coffin case that must have weighed close to a ton. Each week I trudged to the bus stop, trombone in tow, and climbed aboard the number 8, which shuttled me and my coffin from southeast Denver to downtown, or I walked into an old red stone building that might have originally been an apartment house. I let myself in through an obscure, unwelcoming back door and descended the stairs and opened onto a spacious, luxury-deficient, cave-like studio. Tasso, who I've never addressed as Tasso, was dashingly handsome, with silver streaks racing through his jet black hair. His dark eyes did not flare with delight or high expectation when I stepped into his line of vision. They seemed dulled with resignation that I was likely to disappoint him. Again. Sometimes I would surprise both of us by actually playing song style. But when I fell short, Mr. Harris slugged me on my right knee. It was only a glancing blow, not at all painful, more of a corrective than a punishment. Still, a slug to the knee is a slug to the knee. I don't want to leave you the impression that every lesson was a contact sport. Sometimes Mr. Harris would just sigh, "Bring me a note from the doctor stating that you're feeble-minded." With such documentation in hand, he promised to tailor his teaching to my dimness. Sometimes he actually complimented me. "You played that less lousy than you played it before." The teachers I remember are those who taught me something I've never forgotten, even if it had nothing to do with the subject they happened to be teaching, even if I had disappointed them time and again. This time I hadn't disappointed Mr. Harris for something I'd done, but for something I had failed to do, because no one, including Mr. Harris, had told me to do it. After I explained this to him, he grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil and began to scribble. "Do you know what this means?" Mr. Harris asked, showing me a word crafted in deliberately large print for the benefit of the feeble-minded. "It means," he explained, "that there are certain things you do even if nobody has mentioned, suggested, assigned, or ordered you to do them. You do them because they need to be done, and you know it. You do them because you or someone else will be better off if you make the effort." He handed me the piece of paper, which I soon lost or tossed, but that one word carried an electrifying jolt. Countless times it has spurred me to act, even though no one has said or whispered a thing, because it never hurts to show a little initiative. That was never.
So initiative, and they used to say at the press, they used to talk enterprise. Show some enterprise. I have to ask you about your dogs. So the dogs are very famous from the columns. How do they respond as you play? And what about singing? Will they sing with you?
Well, one of my dogs, late dog, Seymour, would go to the exact opposite end of the house and whenever I started playing. If I was downstairs, he would go upstairs into the far end of the house. Some of our dogs, however, and actually including Seymour sometimes, when we had a brass quintet rehearsal in my living room, they would traipse through. They were kind of our unofficial rehearsal dogs. And it was nice to have them at some time, but sometimes if we had lights on the stands and cords below, they could just topple a rehearsal, everything could implode. So my wife would rescue them. In fact, Seymour was kind of fondly remembered because when the quintet would come over and my wife Candy would get home and he would bark at her, she would say to him in a firm way, "No barking, no barking." So that when Seymour finally died, he was about 12, the tuba player sent me a condolence card saying that he was sorry that No Barking was no longer with us. We thought that was his name. My other dogs, Harry is a, he and my wife Candia go to Kaiser. They're in the pet therapy wing of therapy. They're the pet and I'm the music. So he tolerates the music, but when we moved about 6 years ago, we moved to a home that had a downstairs with a bedroom that my wife generously converted into a music room so that she wouldn't have to listen to me. And so she doesn't come down there, and Harry doesn't come down there. Unfortunately, my other dog that I had until January died. Sherman died, rather unexpectedly. He was only 10. But he took the music pretty well. He was a champion sleeper. He could sleep through anything. So I don't think it bothered him too much.
I'm sorry to hear you've lost a dog recently. They're important. Okay, during college you talk about the Stanford band and how important this was to your life. And so they're known for a sort of a whimsical approach to the music. And I wonder if you would share a story from the trip to San Francisco.
Sure will. Yeah, the Stanford band was, I didn't know much about it, and I can assure you, with the benefit of selective hindsight, that we weren't rowdy. We didn't get banned from too many things. We weren't, we never had beer and donuts at our halftime rehearsals on game day. It was just kind of a pretty serious rehearsal. All that sort of evolved after us. In addition, when I was there, it was an all-male band, and I addressed that issue and my unfortunate position on the issue in the book. But the incident you're talking about took place on the eve of something that's called Big Game. And Big Game is sort of the Stanford Cal equivalent of UCLA, USC, or Oregon State, Harvard, Yale, Big Game. So on the eve of Big Game, the Friday night, the band would drive up to San Francisco, be bussed up to San Francisco, and I'll read from there. The Friday night before my first big game, the band bussed to San Francisco, where we snaked through the city that separated the two universities. It was an exuberant, raucous night that began in Union Square and proceeded through Chinatown along Grand Avenue. It was a chilly night and getting colder as we emerged from Chinatown and reached North Beach, home of the city's famous topless bars. Slick, well-dressed barkers paced the sidewalk, enticing and cajoling everyone to step inside and sample the entertainment. Though I didn't accept the invitation, I stood outside and tried my best to leer. But even the sight of North Beach in the flesh failed to warm me up. My trombone felt like an icicle. My fingers were going numb. We had been rallying for hours, and I started to shiver beneath my sweaty red blazer. At last, we arrived at a darkened spot and waited for the buses. A few of us stood around a manhole that was exhaling a comforting cloud of steam. As I luxuriated in this unexpected warmth, I realized that the gentleman standing beside me was not a fellow bandsman, but a gentleman of the street, who had probably been suffering much more than any of us. As we stood side by side, I also began to realize that part of the warmth I was savoring was being furnished by the robust stream of urine the gentleman beside me was depositing on my pant leg. During the trip back to Palo Alto, in a comfortably heated bus, I began to smell very much like a trombone player with urine-soaked pants. However, were no longer numb, and I was able to stretch out a little because no one sat close to me.
I like the way you find the silver lining there. Got to sleep. One thing I discovered about you by reading the book is that you have a competitive streak that makes you push yourself into things that maybe I thought that you were more introverted, but not so much. You have kind of a competitive streak. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you found the whistling competitions?
Yeah, you're right about that. It goes actually, that competitive streak goes back to, this was, again, I think sort of with an assist from my mother. When you're in elementary school and high school, they have solo contests. and you kind of work up a song, and then there's solo day, and all the contestants go down, and judges from various instruments listen to the solo contest. So as much as I was kind of scared and introverted, there was something that I wanted to play in these solo contests. I wanted to see how I could do. And I think I noted in the book that one of the judges in his comments, I found these comments, my siblings kept a lot of boxes and I had inherited them. So as I was doing my research, I went through them, and I found the judge's comments from a solo contest I was in. And he said something like, "Beautiful sound." And then a couple of lines later, "Frightfully flat." So I had work to do. The whistling contest was really just a fluke, really. And I think to this day, my wife regrets it. She discovered we were subscribed to the New Yorker, and this was back in 1977. There was a big 2-page double truck ad in the New Yorker for a whistling contest in Carson City, Nevada. The world's first international whistling contest, which might be a little redundant, but the world's first international whistling contest. And it was sponsored by a computer company. And the kind of gimmick for the computer company, and remember, this is the 70s, so it might sound a little bit fuddy-duddy right now, but the idea was to whistle along with this computer. Adam, I think his name was. But in and around that there were different competitions for classical music and popular music and duets and novelty. And so when I read this ad, I called up my friend in Oregon, Mitch Hyder, newspaper up there. He was a great whistler, and he was just, "We've got to go. We've got to go." So we both went to Carson City, and I did this for 2 or 3 years. Mitch did it for a long time, and actually eventually became the MC for whistling. The Carson City one kind of went by the wayside, but there was a national whistling contest in North Carolina for a long time, and one in Japan, and he became the MC for both of them. But should I read this little passage? Yeah.
Please.
This was a contest where my forte was not in classical music or anything like that. I wasn't that good, but I could do the novelty stuff. So one year I entered, I whistled Autumn Leaves and accompanied myself with a leaf blower, and I did quite well in that contest. And one year I entered with Mitch, my buddy. This was during the year of the Mediterranean, the time of the Mediterranean fruit fly. So my wife made Mitch a medfly costume, and I sang and whistled Medflies to the tune of Blue Skies, and it wowed him. However, it wasn't always this way.
I think you really looked like Jerry Brown in the picture in the book.
Yeah, I've got the suit on, suit and tie like Jerry Brown with banana ears, and then Mitch has kind of styrofoam balls with maybe those pipe cleaners in his head and big plastic ears. He's the medfly. Over the years, I won a trophy or two in a relatively minor category, novelty whistling. Once by belting out Autumn Leaves. But it was the occasional flop that taught me a lesson about performing and writing. This time I was backing myself with an electric typewriter as I whistled, "I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter." Though I thought my act was going quite well, others thought it was going quite long. When I stepped off the stage, a tall, elderly gentleman known in showbiz as Dr. Horatio Q. Birdbath intercepted me. Doc Birdbath had performed with Spike Jones and the City Slickers in the 40s and 50s, a band that specialized in tightly composed musical spoofs. He could mimic the sounds of birds, which made him eminently qualified to judge whistlers. At that moment, however, he counseled me as an old pro who had seen the very best and the very worst. Son, he said, draping his long arm over my shoulder, always leave him wanting more.
And now that we've brought up whistling, you know what I'm going to ask next. I would like to hear a little whistling. You get to choose unless you like my favorite, which is Stars and Stripes Forever.
Oh boy. That's a tough one. Can I add one thing? Because it's a lesson about always leave them wanting more. There were certain, what do they call them, inflection points or crisis points or eye-openers along writing this book. And one was when I submitted the book to a publisher, and actually a query letter, he wanted to see it, so I sent it to him. And weeks later, I got it back, and I said, "Well, no, we thought about it. It's just not us." So usually, I just take no for an answer, and in this case, I was inclined to take no for an answer. But I was just curious, what was it that made you say no? Because he actually wanted to see the book. And he wrote back something like, well, it started off really well, and then it just sort of went off in all these tangents. It just lost focus. And this was probably in March of last year, March of 2022. And I'm pretty thin-skinned. So naturally, my first reaction was that he had no idea what he was talking about. It was just some faceless publisher. And so I went up to Oregon that summer, and I was determined to tinker and then publish the thing. So I started to tinker, just a little bit here and there. I'm sure they're going to find a word that's out of place, etc. And much to my horror, this book was unfocused and meandered all over the place. I'd had this time between just putting it down for a while and this fresh look, which is horrifying. And so my tinkering ended up carving 4,500 words out of that book. Pretty amazing. And made it better, I believe, made it a lot better. There was just stuff there that did not need to be there, did not belong. And when I used to work at the PE and I would go to some classes, talk to kids, a lot of elementary school kids, but sometimes older, I would ask, the teacher would tell me before, oh, they write every day. And that, I believe that, they did. They write, if it's 15 minutes, they write every day. So I said, how many of you like to write? And boy, the hands up. Every hand went up. And then I said, and how many of you like to rewrite? No, maybe one hand. But the real lesson is that rewriting it's a magical process, really, but it's so important. And Doc Birdbath was right. Always leave them wanting more, because I was giving them way too much. Now, that said...
Right now we want some whistling.
Renee has provided me, in case I get too much air, he has provided me with a screen. So you can't hear it, right? tell you, this is another anecdote that just came back to me. Actually, in the back of the book, there's some columns that I wrote, and one of them is about Dr. Patrick Flynn, the old conductor, the flamboyant conductor with the Riverside Philharmonic. Do you remember him at all? Yeah, he was quirky, no doubt about it, but he was also a guy who turned the symphony around. He made it tough, and he made it good. But one time there was a children's concert, and he liked kids a lot. And I think I was emceeing it. It was kind of during the day, all these people came to class. And they played the Stars and Stripes Forever. And I had befriended a flute piccolo player in the symphony, and she was going to do the piccolo part, you know, that part. And so I said, or maybe she said, we talked about it. What if we both did that, a duet? I would whistle it and she would play it, or we would kind of trade off. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And I said, no, I kind of got cold feet. She said, no, you just got to commit to this. You got to commit to this. So we did it. And we didn't tell Patrick Flynn we were going to do it. We just came out and did it. And she said later that any other conductor would have fired her because they were rigid. But he liked surprises. He liked people to try something different. So that kind of stuck in her memory and my memory as one of those funny things that we got away with.
Very good. So in your column, you have always been known for skewering hypocrisy, but you often light things up by setting new lyrics to songs. What's your favorite song parody from the Press Enterprise years? Or if you don't have a favorite, maybe you get asked about one of them a lot.
Well, I like the one that I did. It is actually in the book, but it's about a long time ago,
John Sununu, my chief of staff.
John Sununu took liberties with federal jets, jetted all around to conferences in the Vale and Aspen, sometimes with his wife, and kind of got caught doing it. So I wrote a song about it. I will sing it to you. You want to hear it?
Please do.
Okay. This goes way back, folks. So this is probably, when was George Bush president? He beat, so it was in the 80s, probably 88, 89, 80, 88, 89, 90, that era. So more than 30 years old. It's called Chattanooga Sununu. Pardon me, George, but are you gonna sack Sununu? We trust that you care, that we've been paying his fare. We will assume that things were fine as far as you knew. The man's got his rights, but he should spring for his flights. He left from DC with his Nancy on his C-130, jetted off to Aspen, where the forecast said snow, did a little skiing, maybe some sightseeing, didn't bring his wallet, what a human being. Can you afford to carry baggage like Sununu? Satin and lace, more like a pop in the face. At least make him pay whenever he may roam. Oh, pay up, John Sununu, or kindly stay the hell home.
Very good.
The thing that I like about this one, I got a call from NPR, and they found this. It was kind of like the Andrews Sisters. They found either a quartet or a trio, and they wanted to know if it was okay if they sang it, and they did sing it. So that was really cool. Yeah.
You have another one too. It's to the tune of Yesterday, and it's something from the 50th high school reunion.
Yeah. Yes. This is in 2017. I went to my high school reunion in Denver, Colorado, Thomas Jefferson High School, and Yes, TJ. And I sang this song for them, but it was also kind of a lead into the paragraph that describes what happened after I retired, because it was kind of an explanation of partly why I retired, and I'll explain that after I get through singing the song. Where's my sound system? Oh, here it is. Yesterday, Metamucil seemed so far away. Colonoscopy was hard to say. Oh, I believed it yesterday. Suddenly, we're 4 times older than we used to be. Medicare, Social Security. Oh, yesterday went suddenly. Why we had to age, I don't know. He would not say. Youth is all the rage, but do we long for yesterday? Yesterday. Turn the page, turn the page, turn the page. Yesterday, all our pimples wouldn't go away. SAT scores were on full display. We thought our hair was here to stay. Suddenly, girls I liked refused to talk to me, which came as no great shock to me. The girls, they didn't flock to me. Why we had to age, I don't know, he would not say. Now we're off the stage because we're so yesterday. Here we are, 50 years and we have come so far. Once burned bright and now a shooting star. But young enough to drive a car. Still young enough to drive a car. Thank you.
So you say you're off the stage, but in fact you are not off the stage, because here we are together, and I want to thank you for sharing so much of yourself with us in your columns and your books and your music, and thank you to Inlandia Institute for hosting a conversation at the Culver, and I think Katie has more.
So do we want to take all these questions?
We do. Do you
walk around with a microphone?
Okay, so Katie has a microphone, and if you have a question for Dan, this is the chance.
And while Katie's walking over, I want to thank Katie and Janine and all of Melandia and Chris for doing all this. And thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's very heartening to see you there and listening to me talk and whistle and play my trombone. You should get hazardous duty paid, but in lieu of that, you can ask any question you want.
All right, and this is Pat Williams. I happen to know, because this is my mother.
I was going to tell them that. I'm wanting to know when he's going to publish a book of his columns from the Press Enterprise.
You know, I've been asked that a lot, and I think about it a lot, and I'm kind of this sort of in the back of the book is kind of the first brush at that, and I may yet do it. I just can't figure out which to leave in. Some of them I think would be pretty evergreen. They would be pretty timeless, and others, you know, a lot of my columns are pretty topical and pretty immediate and pretty stale a week later. But I will consider it. I will. I kind of got a little feel for it doing this, and if I can sneak another book past my wife, I will do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question? I do see a hand.
Why did you retire?
Oh,
Hold on.
why did you retire?
Oh, I did already. Oh, that's because I was still old enough to drive a car. I think the thing was that I really loved my job. It was a great job. It was a wonderful job. But I kept asking myself, what if I just did this for as long as I could? And would I look back and regret that I didn't try something else? So it was more like a curiosity of what else was out there. And I didn't know that I was going to keep writing, to tell you the truth. Some people told me, oh, you'll just keep writing, writers always keep writing, but that wasn't really my intention. I just wanted to see what was out there. And when I started off, it was crazy because I tried everything and I got way overextended, and I had to pull back. But I guess if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't know. So that was a big question. And I wanted to do it sooner than later. It happened to be, I would say, good timing as far as the over kind of arch of my career, because for the most of that time, I thought it was a very good paper. Press Enterprise was a very good paper. When I first got there, I made up songs about how boring we were because we covered every meeting. We covered every meeting, and it was, obviously, readers appreciated it, but for reporters to have to do that all the time, it got kind of overwhelming. And so those were kind of the golden years. The Hayes family, to me, was really a very special time. Hayes, Norman Chernus, a great editor, some other great journalists on the paper. And then, as you know, things have changed. It's just not the same. But I wasn't really thinking in those terms, to tell you the truth, that much in 2014. It was there on the horizon, but it was really more to try something else.
Any other questions?
I'm an anonymous fan. I've been to your whistling concert in Idlewild about 25 years ago. I've experienced you in the hall at Kaiser, and I'm an old trombone player. I was pretty good once upon a time. I want to know how, and I really wanted to join, but I read about your trombone choir at Christmas time you were doing on people's front lawns.
Yeah.
How long did you do that?
I didn't do that. The question is about a trombone choir. I didn't do that all that long, but it was the brainchild of Stu Undham. Stu Undham was a great is a great trombone player. He just recently retired from Cal Baptist as a teacher, but he is a fun-loving guy, and he had all the trombone players out in his lawn. You're absolutely right, and he would pass parts around so that most of the time you were just kind of playing second or third part, but then he would put you in the hot seat, so you'd have to go way up in the upper registers that I could never reach and play the lead for the Christmas carols. That was it was a fun time. I just sort of do it because I have other things, but it was fun. It was a great time. I'm sorry you didn't make it. It would have been fun.
What about other subjects, other questions? Connie Ransom down front.
Thank you, Dan. This has really been fun. And I've heard you before, so I didn't hear too many repetitions. I just, and I would have welcomed them anyway. I just was wondering, you do so many things besides what was your day job. And when we had our art gallery, I approached you somewhat timidly, as I recall, to see if you would play for an art fair that we had at the Artworks Gallery. And you said yes. And then, because that building was so interesting, the way the acoustics played out, you wanted to play with sound with your, was it a quartet? The brass. And I just wonder what went through your head, or if you even remember it.
You mean what through my wanting to play with the quintet than just alone?
Yeah. You wanted to sort of play out throughout the whole building.
Probably the acoustics, I'm guessing. That would, a quintet in a kind of a live area sounds pretty good. And also, we've experimented with maybe individuals playing at different parts of a room, kind of antiphonal, I guess you would call it, and just the sound. So you're getting sound from all directions. So that might have been the motivation. Do you remember if we did it though?
Yes.
We did it.
Oh yeah, you
Okay.
were in different spaces throughout the whole
That's
building.
probably what it was. That's probably what it was. Yeah, I think it was the layout and the sound. It was kind of an experiment. Yeah, yeah, that was an interesting building.
Oh, thank you. That was really fun.
All right, oh, one more.
I didn't really have a question, I just came to heckle. So Dan, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you were probably one of the hardest working columnists in the state of California, if not the country. I grew up reading the LA Times and you would see a columnist once a week. You were doing, I think, 3, maybe 4 a week at one point. I was wondering if you could just share with the audience about, wax poetic about some of those great days at the Press Enterprise.
Yeah, I did 4, and that was kind of a bad career move on my part. When I first started writing the column, I inherited the column from Tom Green. Many of you would remember Tom. Tom went on to USA Today, and so his column appeared on B3, inside the B section on 3, and it was over 2 columns. Set over 2 columns. It wasn't like this, it was like that, kind of broad, kind of wide. And so that's what I was doing too. And then there was a redesign of the paper, pardon me, and they decided to move the column out front of the B section, out front, and skinny. So I did the math. I don't do math very well, and in this case I didn't do it very well either. I did the math and I figured out that if I only wrote 3 columns a week, it would be cutting my space by 1/3. So I said, I'll just write 4, because I'll be used to it. And so they said, oh, okay. And that's how it happened. It wasn't, and there was no turning back. So I had to do it. But I really got a lot of help from people like you, John, and Ray Smith over here, a lot of people in the staff, Chris and Steve, a lot of help, a lot of tips, people covering their beats very well, so I could just kind of cherry pick and make a couple of phone calls and bounce off of what they had already done. So they worked awfully hard. And also, and probably the best part of that job was the relationship with the community. Because the readers would write to me and later email me and kind of say, hey, since you write this kind of column, you might be interested in this, or we get tips from people inside of City Hall or inside of county government or the DA's office. And it would be, don't use my name, but, and so I would check it out. Usually it might be a document that I'd be able to get, so that I wouldn't have to take somebody's word for it. And so it was, yes, it was hard work, but it was, had a lot of help. It was not a one-man band by any stretch. And I had a lot of freedom from the paper, but I also had some great gatekeepers. There are a couple of people on the desk who were, one in particular was a great grammarian, and another one was a lawyer. And so a couple of times I got a call from the lawyer, and she said, I don't think you better do this. I did have one column, if I can digress, I'll tell you about the column I had, was Killed. And this was back in the old days when Moreno Valley was just sort of getting started, and remember Woodhaven Homes? It was a very local, I think it was a local developer and a very active developer. And I think they had skylights on their homes, and they didn't stay on. And the winds would come up and they would blow off. And so I wrote what I thought was sort of a satire of a developer, and I called it wind-shaven homes. And I said that it wasn't an accident that things like that happened. It was really intentional. Kind of like if you remember in the old days of the National Football League, some of the runners would have rip-away jerseys. So if a tackler grabbed them, you just kind of end up with a handful of fabric. And so I kind of likened that to the wind-shaven home, that they were kind of built to fall apart so there'd be less damage. The rest of the house would stand. So I got a call, and this was not by a lower editor, this was by a top editor, and he informed me that this was reeking of libel, and there's no way it was going to see print. And I tried to talk him out of it. Of course, he was right. Kind of an imputed a motive to a builder who sounded an awful lot like Windhaven. So that was killed. So I had a lot of protection when I got out of line, and that helped a lot too. Anybody else?
Okay. Last question.
Uh-oh. This guy, Ray Smith, is a friend of mine. Ray and his dog Bruno come over to my house every Monday and play with Harry. I play with Ray, and Bruno plays with Harry. Go ahead.
Okay, so 2 parts. Are Bruno and Harry getting together tomorrow?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, Candy wanted to know. Yes, they're coming.
Okay. And then second, so many of your columns you read and just thought how fantastic they were over the years. But did you have any that you thought, boy, that really stunk on ice?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I had this one column, and it was about one of the wars, maybe the Iraq War or something, but it didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out at all. And it just completely turned off my so-called base. I got calls from people saying, if you're gonna write like this, I'm canceling, you know? I mean, it was just so poorly done. And usually my sort of backstop of last resort was Candia, my wife, who was a very good and tough editor. And I think she sent me, you know, she was gingerly, but I could tell she didn't like it either, but I was stubborn. I thought it worked, and boy, it was a stinker. And I think I ended up writing a clarification in the next column, just how embarrassing it was. So yeah, so a couple of didn't work. Yes, sir.
Dan,
Briggs, yes.
you came from Denver, and there was a columnist there a long time named Gene Engel in the Rocky Mountain News that had very similar take on Denver that you've had in this area. Along those lines, who inspired you as you were starting out to take the sort of view of the community that allowed you to write those columns?
That's a good question. I think a couple of answers to that. One was Tom Green, who I thought did a really nice job of capturing Riverside. And another, I think, was Herb Cain, who, when I was up there in college, up in San Francisco, Palo Alto in college, and so we read the Chronicle quite regularly, and he just seemed to be having fun, but also keeping his eye on things. And I thought that was that was an inspiration as well. And also Norman Churtis, the executive editor of the paper, when I first got started, he gave me this edition of a magazine called Quill Magazine that was this edition was written, had articles by a lot of columnists from let's see, William Sapphire to a guy named, I'm going to mess up some of these names. Oh, Richard Cohen from the Washington Post. I think Jack Smith from the LA Times. And so they gave me a lot of don't do thises, a lot of how not to's. And so that kind of influenced me too. I said in the book, there was Richard Cohen said that when he started his column, he loved Mike Royko. And so he said, by the time I was 2 or 3 months into my column, I could write a great Mike Royko column. And he said, but I didn't have a Richard Cohen column. And I kind of intellectually knew what he meant. And he said he stopped reading Mike Royko. And he said other columnists have stopped reading Jimmy Breslin for the same reason, because they were writing like Breslin, or they were writing like Royko. And the guy that I had to stop reading was Dave Barry, because he was very good, very funny, and very tempting to imitate him. And I probably did a few times do that. And I guess I've got to stop this. And you have to kind of find, you can be inspired by people, which is great, but you have to kind of somehow find your own voice, which is basically derivative. It's kind of a combination of a lot of voices. So I think many influences kind of made me what I am, for better or for worse.
All right.
Katie, do you have other things to say about where people can buy the books?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you to Chris for her wonderful question. And to Dan for his wonderful answers and the whistling and singing, all of the things. That was wonderful. So, we have some books. I want to allow time for you to purchase a book, to mingle and have a little bit of a reception. We have some refreshments. But also I want to say that if you don't get a book today, we have a resupply coming tomorrow. So if you want to, you're welcome to pay for it now. I will get Dan to sign it, and I will hand deliver it to you as long as you're not in Connecticut. I can hand deliver it locally, or we can find another way. Dan, you have a couple of other events coming up. Do you want to tell us where you'll be?
Next Saturday, I'll be I'll be downtown at this River Gallery A, is that what it's, I forgot.
Riverside Community Arts Association, is that it?
Yes,
RCAA?
yes, RCA, yes, that's right. It's just on Lime Street. I believe Lime Street. Maybe it's Lemon Street. I know this town. That's at 5 o'clock, from 5 to 7. It's an art gallery, so it's not just me. There'll be some really nice art there too. And if you have, you're welcome to attend that. It'd be great if you did. But if you happen to grab a book and it hasn't been signed yet, please, I'll be happy to hand deliver my signature wherever you are, as long as it's not in Connecticut.
All right. And is there something having to do with animals, I heard, too?
Oh, well, that is her event. It was going to be at the Humane Society, but I think that not Humane Society, the Animal Services. Yeah, but
that not happening.
That's
okay.
And then I think there's on the 15th at the Riverside Public Library, there's kind of a general authors presentation. So I'm going to be involved in that. I think there are other authors will be there too. So you can kind of get an idea what other people are writing, and they'll talk about their books as well.
Yeah, so I hope that you do attend some of these other events. And I also want to say thank you to the Culver Center and UCR Arts for once again allowing us to use their beautiful space. And thank you. As a reminder, Inlandia offers these events for free, and they are open to the public. If you would like to help to support events like these, I encourage you to become a member if you are not already. It's only $25 for a year. So with that said, thank you all for being here. Rush to the table to buy the last 5 copies, and we'll talk to you, and we'll have some snacks. Don't let me take any cookies home.